Totally.
This is Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. It was released by Naughty Dog in 2016. In this video, we will see environment breakdowns from blockouts to final version, time-lapse that shows the process of the art team, and much more. Let's look into the work of Andres Rodriguez, the Treasury. So, as an environment artist, he was in charge of modeling and world building in the scene as well as minor texture work. He worked alongside the concept artists to come up with the look for the area. He collaborated with a designer and a texture artist to take this level from design block mesh to finished product. So, we see his team members right here. And let's look at this first, where we see this is the lighting pass, where we can see everything together. And here's one of my favorites, the wireframe. And you can see, so this is the treasury. You can see all the overgrown vegetation, the destruction, and some props which are laying down on the ground, which are, of course, misplaced, broken. You can see all the density. We can see the cards for the foliage. And here, this is I believe this is a concept art, or it's... So this is one angle facing the statue. This is another one. And this is the angle that we had initially. So we can see all the foliage, all the broken up, destructed parts. And we see the environment in all its glory. Here is one side of the wall. This is always very interesting. We can see very intricate detail because this is a very prestigious, it was a very prestigious building, and it's the clash of very luxurious, ancient, super detailed environment with, of course, the overgrown and the wear and tear and weathering of the environment. Next, we have a very iconic environment, which is called the Colony Cliffs. So basically the same workflow, worked as part of a team. He did mostly modeling and some texturing. This environment is especially fun to play through, offers a lot of cover, spots to hide from the enemies. And here we have a very good look at a diorama. And again, very interesting to see how everything was done via alpha cards for the vegetation, for the moss on the roof here. And you can see a lot of opacity was used here and there. Those very long vines here, all done with alpha cards. And you can see also the details of the stones and bricks, which demanded more geometry. And you can see here low density, and here much higher density. And you can see why. Because the need for vertex painting with blending the material was much higher here. Moving on to Scotland Cliffs. And here it's a very different environment than what we have covered so far. here we have the kit that was used throughout the level. We can see how it was done again. Quite high density for blending the material. You have snow, you have several different layers of rock and moss, so quite dense and very versatile. And then you see in the environment right here, you see it all together, and you see the wireframe right here. Always interesting to be able to study those screenshots. So let's make the most out of it. When you build a new environment, you study those. This might be a 9-year-old game, still holds up extremely well, and you can be sure it followed industry good practices. Now another very interesting environment, the Tower Fallen. So this is very intensively destroyed tower, and you can have a better understanding of on how that was handled. So again, it's highly complex and detailed walls, windows, doors. Like the architecture is it's not simple, and you have to see a bit inside to make it believable that it's broken up. So you see the kit here, see different angles, so we can see its many faces and pieces. And here we have the breakdown. Have the wireframe. So nothing is very low poly, as you can see. Like the budget was quite high. Here's a good look. I like to see those pieces also. Very, very informative. Now onto the work of David Baldwin, who worked on Madagascar. So he was happy to be part of the team that helped bring this new driving gameplay area to life. He was responsible for modeling some of the boulders and cliffs, 2 of the towers, and the several large chunks of terrain. The rest of the props plans were laid out by him using slightly modified versions from other locations in the game. That's a current thing, of course, especially with foliage and vegetation in general. It is reused as much as possible. Overall modeling for the Jeep level was a collaboration between himself and Anthony Vaccaro. Shader texture work was done by Heather Serlin and Genese Esprado. Since this was our first large open level, they had no tools for terrain and ground clutter. So every chunk of grass and rock was placed by hand. That is insane for the scope of the environment. This new gameplay was also a challenge to set up as the environment that looked natural but worked for both the player and the Jeep. Yeah, that definitely was a challenge. This is a panoramic image. It's a 360 image actually. So you can take a look on the artist's page on ArtStation. I took a few screenshots. They are very impressive shots, and we can see, we can have a very cool shot of the environment. And here's what we are interested in. It's a work in progress to see how was it done. So we can go to the next one, and we see that some foliage was laid out already. Some rocks and stones. Some stones were placed along the path. Then the structures were laid out. Foliage was added alongside. So since it was a driving level, the tracks or the roads were probably clearly established from the start, even though you could of course drive around, but those were the main road, the main gameplay logical gameplay area, and everything was added around that. This is a very cool look at the structure with the tower. Top view. Another very interesting view from afar. Getting densely populated with foliage. And the final version in the game. So now we're getting to Madagascar City, where the chase is happening. The iconic scene, one of the many iconic scenes from the game. So this was a small section from the E3 demo, actually. He modeled the ground and a few of the props as well as a few buildings. Most of the geo was kit bashed from existing models. The original block mesh in the work in progress pictures was set up by Kurt Margeno. Shader texture work was done by Heather Certain. So another 360 image, another one here to give a wide look at this crazy scene. If you have never played that game, you have to. Don't wait, just get it and play it. It's absolutely amazing, if only for this scene, which is just so fun, crazy, and yeah, we'll look into how it was built up. So after, well, actually it's in the middle of the chase. You basically are funneled through this area. You have absolutely no choice but to get there. And yeah, they had planned it this way so you experience that moment. So it's a huge slope, then some buildings, and then basically you land on a parking of cars, so you don't die and crash your Jeep entirely. But it's just absolutely insane. And this is much more work was put on this screenshot. So then we can see from here, you can see probably the basic blockout or close to a very basic blockout, just to give an idea. And then a much closer to final version with lots of foliage already, lots of cars, and the path being clearly laid out. Here from another angle. This is just amazing to have those screenshots. Other angle, so again, can compare. This is quite similar to this version. Just a different angle. Again, from another angle, the blockout. And here it is with reused cars. Some different models, of course, but like that was not final, but we were getting there. And here, couple of and here are a couple of shots from that amazing area. Now to another environment, the Fancy. So the boat. Henry Avery's ship, the Fancy. So I was happy to be part of the team, of course. I was responsible for modeling all of the ship, but the masthead, statues, and original filigree. Most of the treasures found on board were outsourced. The cave around the ship was laid out by him using slightly modified rocks and props from other locations in the game. So that is very interesting. So of course, detailed assets such as statues usually are handled by character artists or other 3D artists. Treasures and smaller stuff or outsourced. This is typical. And other smaller things and rocks and small props are repurposed from other locations in the game. So he attempted to make the ship as historically accurate as he could while allowing for proper gameplay. Of course, you have to make it fun to play in, adapt it. That's always the case. Major gameplay requirement was that the space needed to allow the player to both walk and swim through the entire ship. this made the ship taller and more flat than it would have been. Using the railing and hull's profile, he tried to add back some of the curved, sleek feel of what this ship would probably have had. To help keep the authentic feel, he even went as far as to model the sailcloth based on the width of textile looms of the era. So again, details, high quality is in the details. We say the devil is in the details also, but high quality is found in the smallest details, and going above and beyond, doing more research and being accurate. I mean, in this case, it's based on an historically existing boat, so it was kind of an obvious choice to do more research, to go very far and deep in the research. But even if it was not, basing a ship that you would be working on historical, accurate from that time, similar boats would go a very long way. And yeah, it's not one to one. He had to adjust it for gameplay. Of course, it's a video game. It's not just an art showcase. But as you play through this environment, you feel that. I mean, I'm not a specialist of boats personally, but it feels like it makes sense. It's another 360 panoramic image. This is inside with all the treasure. So you can see, of course, this gets outsourced because it takes quite a while to do. And yeah, everything has to be ready at some point, and we can't wait. So here's the actual model. And you see that the inside had to be, like the structure itself had to be modeled too, because it was broken up in some parts. Very rich, very interesting environment to work on. And fantastic job also with all the complexity of all the cables, the sailcloth. Like, that's quite the endeavor. Must have taken quite a bit of time. And then you can appreciate the finer details, the materials, the lighting, and the general feel. Very beautiful. And now in all its glory, with all the ornaments, with of course some destruction. It wouldn't be a Naughty Dog game without destroyed parts of the environment. So that's very, very, very well made right here. We can see the anchors, and now divided in 3 pieces, fragmented like this. Another look. You can see how much detail. It's a huge environment, just this piece. And this is part of a wider, bigger environment in a cave. So that is a task for experts. Last project from the artist on this game, The Office. So this is a smaller environment, but just as interesting as others. So model, originally layout, and a few of the props, including a model of the fancy. The other props and the final layout was done by outsourcing. So you see you have a model of the fancy right here. And obviously the small props are done by outsourcing, as usual. And here you have the layout. Another view from the other angle. Yet another angle, other rooms. And screenshots of the interiors. If you are interested in learning how to apply those techniques that we're covering while analyzing those games, I have created a class in which I show everything step by step. I show all the techniques, all the tricks. There are no time lapse, nothing is done off screen. And I take the time to explain what we do and why we do it. I show the best practices. And we are covering a small environment from A to Z. We are showing every single step of how it's done on a professional production. So if you are interested, check it out. There's the link in the description, and there's a discount available with the code provided. So this is one of the most famous sequences from the game, and it feels like it's pulled out of a Indiana Jones movie. So let's look at the work of Rogelio Olguin, who worked on this very level. So we can take a look at the beautiful screenshots of the surrounding. Interesting architecture. And then straight into this alley that we just saw the Jeep of our protagonist go through. So other buildings of this very environment, and then some surrounding areas around here, some buildings of the surrounding areas. And here, as you see, in full action while the Jeep is going through this alley. Very nice shots. And here we have deep dive into those buildings. So as you see, of course there were a lot of buildings needed, both for very close purposes and others for a little further down the road, because the city was still quite a dense city. So they needed a lot of buildings, different variations, different sizes. And here we will see, take a look behind the scene. So you have all those assembled model, and here you can see the LODs. So LOD1 proxy, which is basically a placeholder for far away buildings, and the LOD0, which would be the highest level of detail. So you see that there's quite a bit of geo, and it's not super dense everywhere necessarily for vertex painting. Just in some areas. Do we have the actual building? I believe we have it somewhere. It's exactly this one. So you can see that there is some material blending going on, but still it's not a building that the player would enter. So the need was not that great for extremely detailed material blending. So no need for super dense wireframe, super dense vertex count. Here you have other examples with the wireframes. Always great. We can see the density. We can see how it was modeled. How do they manage certain parts? Very good to have for people who are interested in doing buildings for AAA or any kind of game for that matter. From the same artist, we take a look at some ZBrush sculpts here. So detail was either tweaked or added inside Substance for some of these. So yeah, it's always a combination of ZBrush and Substance Designer for experts of textures. So texture material nowadays, they spend, depending on the project, depending on the need, they spend a lot of time in Substance Designer. They also use ZBrush and Substance Painter for some case, but we're talking about reusable, tileable materials here, right? So of course, Substance Painter is used for unique assets, hero props, and all the likes, but texture artists are usually mandated to create the library. So more more on tileable, reusable materials. So those look great. And see, they are also called upon to do some kits, some parts, some modeling parts, some assets again that will be reused over and over. So sculpting, extracting the maps, and being part of the creation of various kits. And you see, if you're wondering, if you are aspiring texture artist in the industry, regardless of the games that you might be working on, modern day fantasy, you're going to be doing a whole lot of bricks, stone walls, cobblestones. Some materials will be a bit more unique, but those are the classics, right? And then, of course, all the organic soil, ground, pebbles, stones. Then you might have something a little bit more exotic, like this one here, for the need of a specific area of the game. But if you're wondering in what you should excel on your portfolio, well, you know, it's fun to be original, and it's great. And I've seen it. I've seen artists entering the industry with like crazy creative materials, but the good old classics, you need to nail them down. And now let's look at Edgar A. Martinez's work on the dining room. So the wireframe render here is done with Maya Mantle Ray, which is an old technology that's not really used anymore today, but it doesn't matter. And we see the environment as seen in the game. And here we see the wireframe. So this is a gold mine of information. And you can see that the density is not the same on the floor as it is on the walls. On the ceiling, well, it's because of the geometry also, but even here you see that it's a little bit more intense, a little more dense. So you can see the smaller parts, the table, chairs, which are quite detailed. You can see the light. We can see the main room here. We have several angles actually, but it's always good to see them next to each other. The wireframe and the final results. And the final result. And you can pay attention to some details, like the curtains here are actually quite dense, so that was needed for a more natural flow of the geometry, so they didn't look super low poly. The floor was using a pretty clean material, so there was no need for material blending with vertex painting, so no need for dense geometry. You can see that everything is very well optimized, and some piece of furniture will always require a little bit more geometry. And you can see the chair here is using solid geometry with transparent material, with a little bit more of the environment, which is very, very nice. So from the same artist, here is the Trainwreck level, which is a multiplayer map. So the artist recreated the classic level of Uncharted 2 from the ground up, but he had to stay true to the fans and original artists, of course. So he did most of the modeling of the environment, the trains, some covers. Another artist helped with the cover and textures, and they reused the Jeep from Uncharted 4. So the wireframe render will show the highest level of LOD. So So here we see the environment. Very nice environment for a multiplayer map with lots of covers. And here we will dig into the wireframe renders. So you can see the terrain has, in some areas, a lot of geo, and in some others, much less. So that is really well optimized. Put the geo where you need it for blending materials, and you can appreciate all the assets. You can see the Jeep, which is hanging here. You can see this part of the train is much more dense than this one, needed more details, that's why. And see the environment here, also same principle. That's really interesting to see how they handled the situation. Very nice renders of wireframes. Here we have a very nice time-lapse video of the Madagascar level by Anthony Vaccaro. We are seeing months and years worth of work in a very short sequence. We can see different areas, different angles. Notice how some things change over the course of the production, but the essence remains. We will look closely into this environment as this time lapse is quite fast, but super impressive. Congrats to the team on this amazing level. So let's take a closer look and let's hear it from the artist. So he was in charge of developing the look of this level while working closely with texture artist Genesis and game designer James Cooper. They created the different types of surfaces the player would drive the Jeep across, as well as most of the organic assets used throughout the level, including the abandoned pirate watchtowers used for combat. They also worked with David Baldwin and Heather Serlin, who used the look they established to help build their own sections of the Madagascar level. Of course, it's a huge level. You can't expect one artist to do everything. It's just too big. It just would take too much time. So we saw this in the wireframe. Of course, it goes super fast. That's kind of the point of the time lapse, is to show the progress, show the process actually, going from what looks like a blockout all the way to very polished, amazing looking area, right? But you have to realize how much stuff changes midway due to gameplay. You have to adapt some stuff, then technical limitations, then in some cases there might be a change in the art direction, or it could be many reasons. But the art team has to adapt to many things along the way. And we can see many different areas which are really nice. And we will see some wireframes, don't worry. We are getting there. So we see some rocks and we see the player scale. That's always very important. Good that we have the text, because in some cases we might have not, we might have missed it. So of course everything is gigantic. The trees, if you can compare the scale, are absolutely gigantic. the rock formation, the cliffs, the boulders. And here we have the wireframe. So you see that all the foliage is using the card. All the foliage are using the alpha cards. And you see that the rocks are actually quite dense. So a lot of painting was needed around here. And you can see it's much more than just the soil and the rock. The rock itself has probably 3 or 4 layers, if not much more. You have the moss in this one. So quite a bit of geometry to allow for that. And here we have a good look at the foliage. The trees also are not low poly by any mean. Now a look at the structures, and we can appreciate, drawing your attention right here. This is a prime example of basically what you don't learn in school. And this is just like on the job. The need is there for that, and the team is just doing that. And that's not the kind of stuff you learn at school, right? The different levels of density. You can see here it's quite low. It's not extremely low, but it's much lower than the rest. And you have some material blending going on. You actually have quite a bit. You have a little bit more on the bottom part here. So you have a little bit more geo, and also it's modeled in a way that you can see the different layers, right? The bricks would be under the plaster here. But then going on this part, you see that here is basically double the density, more or less. And here it's even much more, because you have a lot more going on. And here, to really make your destructed wall parts, the inside of the destructed walls, believable, well, their technique was to use way more geometry. As you can see here and there, it is very, very dense. And this is why it looks really good. It doesn't look like a flat tileable texture and a few bricks sticking out, right? And like in some cases, it is extremely dense. So that's very interesting to note. We can see actually maybe a bit better here. So you can see as much geometry as they use. Like, this is definitely not something that you see in school. This is not how you learn to model stuff. If you're lucky and you have a teacher that shows you destruction, maybe you have been made aware of some principles, but this is not by any means considered basics. I'm talking about formal school training. You might get into that by the end of your program, but in some cases, artists are just not exposed to those things. So they learn to do very well, they execute very well the basics, but this is that's the reality on the job, right? It's maybe not every single game will feature such environments, but so many will. So I don't want to get into a super long discussion about the shortcomings of the school system. I teach in college, and we're doing our best to update our programs constantly, or courses or classes. But the reality is that's not really what you learn in the regular courses, whatever type of diploma program that you're in. You learn the basics that allows you to jump into that, which is a bit more advanced. But the reality is many studios who, everybody knows that juniors have a hard time. Entry level jobs are hard to get by, because that's the job. So whether you have very little experience or a lot, they still need you to get on board, right? They need you to work on these things. So someone who has no idea and is not showing any of that on their portfolio versus someone who has been in the industry for 4 or 5 years, have been doing that. Well, you would do the same if you were hiring manager. You would go with someone who has done it, right? So I know and I hear a lot of graduates being frustrated at these situations, and in some cases they turn against the school. They're like, "Well, you didn't train us properly. The program is not, not reflecting what's needed in the industry." And I'm not trying to defend the position of the specific school I work at. The only thing I can say, and I've been a student, I graduated, I struggled, and I made it. So I've been through all those phases. And the reality is, you got to get into that by yourself. Either that specific thing, which is here destructed parts of environments, or just more advanced technical stuff. Like, you can't wait to get a job and then they teach you these things. That's not how this works. You gotta be curious, you gotta go ahead, and you gotta like jump in the pool, and you gotta try to swim as best as you can, right? And even if you have zero experience in a studio doing that, if you are doing that in your personal projects for your portfolio, that will attract the attention of the studios. So this is what you should be doing. And of course, this is specific to Naughty Dog. Like, their environments are kind of always this way, but it's true for most studios. What is considered more advanced stuff, juniors should get into this by themselves, by making mistakes, maybe having little guidance. It doesn't matter. You have to show initiative, curiosity, and okay, it might not look as good as that, right? Because these guys have years of experience. But just the fact that you're getting into it, that you're running into the problems that everybody ran into initially, the questions that you might have, like, how do I make this look better? How do I execute that? Well, you have a lot of answers right here. You add geometry here in this case, right? I mean, in this very case, the answer is like, add tons of geometry. It's fine. Again, which is not what you learn in school, but this is what is the reality on the job. Still by the same artist, the City Chase. So we have already seen a part of this level. Now we're going to see another part because it's a huge level. So this section was just one of many of the entire city level, which is a heart-pounding race through the city in the Jeep. That's a beautiful way to put it. So let's look at another part of the level that we have covered initially. So just you get a sense, this is the sewer kind of area with the little bridges. Here you have another section, then back to here following the trucks. And we have a beautiful wireframe render right here. So you see all the foliage, of course. It's kind of taking a lot, but at the same time, it's alpha cards, so it's pretty optimized. But I like to note that all the roofs are modeled. Nothing is just a texture with a normal map and a height map or whatever. It is all modeled. So you should take good note of that. Another environment by the same artist, the River Rapids. So he served as an environment artist for the River Rapids section. The entire jungle river level was worked on by multiple artist teams, so many assets were used and shared throughout the team, as it should be for large levels. So let's take a look. This is another beautiful level with lush vegetation, with, of course, a body of water and ancient structures. So really typical of Uncharted, typical level with very nice wireframe again, and you can see again alpha cards, You can see the density that they use for the alpha cards. It's not just a simple plane. They give it a bit of geometry so that they can bend it properly. So you can see the main assets, such as the door here, the very large door, is actually quite dense in polygons. And now onto a very different level called Reef. So he served as an environment artist for the underwater reef. This one was the first level created for Uncharted 4. His texture shader artist Genesis Prado and him were lucky enough to develop the look of this level from the ground up. We developed the entire look of the underwater reef and created all the coral underwater assets. We also created the sunken ship, which would become the basis for all the ships in the game. Unfortunately, the original reef level was cut from the game due to a change in direction of the project. Luckily, Genesis and I were able to create this small section of reef to keep for the final game in the open water level. That is very interesting. And yes, these things happen. Some people are working months and years on some parts and they get cut. Very fortunately, many of these assets were saved and transferred to another level. And these things happen, guys. And this is such a beautiful, vibrant level. It must have been very challenging to work on. So we will see the details of the assets. So you can see and you can compare the wireframe. Yes, that's not just a big pile with a texture done in Substance Designer. It is all modeled right here. Okay, so the handling of the optimization, that's another story, but it's not so bad. It's really not so bad, and especially even if this is from 2016, the engine have been able to handle more geometry for quite a while. So it's really more the texture memory budget that's the issue, as covered on the Last of Us series of videos. So you can see some very nice shapes. And here also for the underwater rock formations. And here we have a look at the boat with all of these beautiful assets laid down on the seabed. This is very impressive and such a gold mine of information. Once more, we have to study these things. If you graduate recently from school or you're about to, I mean, probably you shouldn't reach for such a complicated piece of portfolio immediately, but you can get some pieces of information here and there, and that would go a long way. Here we have Emilia Schatz, game designer, and some insights into level design and game design. So this is for general game. There are different levels involved, but we can start with this one where you see, this is so interesting. You see references and screenshots from little, that's such a good way to handle a big level with a map like this, and then being able to see screenshots from every little part. That's so fun. Then you have the aerial shot, and here we are diving into the blockouts of Uncharted 4, and this is just great. So these images were pretty much everywhere on the net a few years ago, and they were used for like, hey, this is how we do blockout, this is level design at Naughty Dog. And you see it's color coded, and it's using the, if not final, a very good looking model for the main character. And it's really about game design, level design. And we can learn so much about how the games are developed. And you can see the foliage here. It's actually mapped onto very simple geometry, so it's kind of hilarious, but it does the job. You know where it will be, right? This is a waterfall. So before the art department start to work, this is how it is. A game is gameplay first, and you have to lay down the basis of the game. So the gameplay, the level, and then the art team comes in and work its magic. So I think this is a must for anybody interested in becoming a game dev to see how it looks like during phases of development. And you see enemy placement. Well, before we have the model, the animations, everything being programmed, the damage, the weapons, everything. This is how it looks like. This is how it should, like, this is the start of it. And then you have the player traversal. How can he interact with the level? And this is, I believe, this is a must. Like, this is where we get started. And now for another cool behind the scene look. This one is from Doug Holder and Emilia Schatz that we just covered. And this is basically images of the production. This is how it looks in Maya. And this is their engine, right? So Charter 1.2, well, that was for Uncharted. And you see the volumes. It reminds me of other proprietary engines I've been working with. At the end of the day, they kind of all look the same. They just don't do the same things, right? And you can see here with the debugs, with everything. So this is really like pretty exclusive stuff. And then you see in-game at the end of the day how it looks like. Now on to concept art. So here's a look at Nick Jindro Clock Tower level. Level designed by James Cooper. And here is how it looks if you're working in a studio. So concept art is not always about the beautiful, amazing, final kind of marketing images that you see outside of production. Inside the production, it's highly functional, and it's about understanding the 3D navigation in a lot of cases. And it's meant to help the 3D team, the level design team. It's really meant to help everybody visualize how it's going to look like, what can we do, how can the player interact with the environment. Here's another concept artist, Nicholas Schumacher. So Treasury interior, mood painting done for the treasure level for Naughty Dog's Uncharted. The second piece was a scrapped puzzle element for this room. Have to let go of good ideas sometimes in order to keep the pacing on point. Yeah, that's part of the game. It happens on every production. So you can see here the door that became famous. And here is one of the tasks of a concept artist. It's to help everybody understand how some mechanism works. So this is very good, I believe, for young concept artists to see. This is part of the job, and this is 3D. So having basic skills in 3D can go a long way. See, there's nothing fancy about that. It's basic modeling, assigning very basic materials, and then it's just to make the rest of the team understand. And here we have other pieces. Very nice piece here. The lever that is inside of this little ornamental decorative piece. Different ideas for the handle. And also ideas for the ornamentation. From the same artist, production sketches. Just a collection of production sketches for cover ideas, props, and various rooms. Production work is rarely shown, but I thought I'd share a little bit of design process that goes into making the game. Thank you so much. This is invaluable for everybody. So he's absolutely right that production sketches are not shared that frequently. So you see different ideas for covers before the team starts to model the stuff, before we wait for the stuff, so that it takes weeks and months. Well, a concept artist can get it done much quicker. And then the art directors, the design directors, they chime in. They say, okay, maybe I think it's not going to work because of this, because of that. And that speeds up the process. Here we have actually two different ideas for this part, which is very interesting to see. Here we have other assets. Here the altar with the scale comparison with the main character. Still in the concept art department, this is an outsourced studio, one pixel brush, and they worked on Avery Island. So Uncharted 4 Concepts Ahoy! A while back we helped with a tiny slice of this epic game. And here is the result in-game. And here is the look of what they worked on. So it's very interesting to see. In some cases, it's really ideas for the actual level coming with a blockout, right? So I'll let you take a look at the board, and so I'll make the board available and you can take a look at all the details. But this is fascinating. This is really good insights on how some studios work, how they outsource some work. Very interesting stuff. Now on to Aaron Limonik, who did concept art for the tavern. Here's some process on his design of an interior for Uncharted 4. Starting with a quick sketch, I built a really quick 3D model and started texturing and painting over that to create the final. So, quick sketch, which gives still already a lot of information onto what kind of environment we'll see. Then basic 3D, some ID maps to help select different elements, and then a paint over. So we're not expecting concept artists to become 3D artists, but that can speed up the process a whole lot, right? From this basis, then they bring that up in Photoshop and they can paint over. They have the dimensions, they have a very good idea of the lighting. Like, this is really using technology and there's design skills to speed up the process. So this is super interesting. Another project from the same artist, Small Island. He added some art direction and thought process for this region. So that is always interesting. See the measures, dimensions, everything is extremely important, even in the art department, even for some concept art. You have a lot of information shared by the whole team to the art directors. They make decisions, they make changes, and then you see those changes end up in the game. So documentation is important for everybody on the team. Artists, designers, everybody will be working with the documents, either creating themselves. That's more for the art directors, the leads in most cases. The rest of the team can update, add, change, but everybody needs the documents. And here we see the final look, which is glorious. So you can see here from a quick concept how it can be implemented in the engine very quickly with rough materials and unfinished assets, just for the purpose of testing, seeing if it's gonna work. So I thought it would be important to show some foliage from Uncharted 4 because it's a, it's a significant part of the game. So let's look at Adam Lildale, who worked on many environments. So he's saying he's proud to have been able to work on Uncharted 4 from the beginning look development stages to the final release. That must have been something. So let's take a look at some amazing environments that he worked on. Beautiful angles also, nice shots. And yeah, guys, this game is from 2016. It still looks absolutely gorgeous today. Let's take a closer look at the foliage itself. A patch of grass with a bigger plant, and here we can take a good look at how it is handled. So it's not that much geometry, but it's more than in many other games from that era for sure. You see the smaller pieces on the floor. It's not a plane, right? It has 4 triangles, so it is divided so that it can be bent a little bit pretty much everywhere. And this is what gives a much more organic feeling, a natural look to those plants. So now onto the work of Jeremy Huxley, and let's dive right in those jungle environments. And here is an amazing screenshot, an amazing breakdown of the mesh, the flat texture, and the shaded mesh. So let me zoom in because those images are in very high quality. Let's zoom in on the shaded, which outlines every little part and different instances of aging. And let's take a look at the environment itself. A quick look at the colony stacks, which is an iconic level in this game from Martin Takeman. So let's take a look at those beautiful shots. Very iconic, really fun, like a classic level in, I would say, in the video game history now. It looks very good, completely overrun by nature. And we'll get to the breakdown, just a few more shots. Lots of foliage everywhere, on every side. And here's an amazing look, side by side, of a diorama of a structure, then just the model, with all the cards, right? All the foliage cards. And here is the wireframe. You can see all the vines hanging that you can see are cards. You can see how they're modeled. They have many segments so that they can, it looks like they flow much more naturally than if it was just a simple plane. Here's another one. Another structure, the model, and the wireframe. Let's look now at the work of Artem Brizitsky, some vegetation examples. And how gorgeous, we can see how gorgeous that is. Different examples from different biomes, so that's very impressive. Great work. And we see even some different, well, assets were done by other artists, I imagine. And then it's not just the models themselves, it's placing the foliage that is the art, right? To make it look like it's it's natural and it would attach itself on structures, this is really where it becomes an art. And here we have great look at the albedo, normal map, translucency map, depth map, AO map, ID map, roughness map, and the high poly geo. So thank you to the artist for sharing so much information. So this concludes our epic journey into Uncharted 4, A Thief's End Breakdowns. Some work from this board has not been covered in the video. I will make the board available so that everybody can take a look. If you have not already, please put a like, hype, consider subscribing to the channel. Many great videos on amazing games will be covered on the channel very soon. So stay tuned for the next video.